But here to discuss the local race in his area, because he's a candidate for it, is Tom Chavez. I met Tom about 4 years ago in the midst of the COVID stuff. He came out for my Christopher Rufo event that we had, and we've been good friends ever since then. He started EPIC, Elmhurst Parents for Integrity in Curriculum, and he recruited some candidates to win, and they did not make it in 2023. Well, Tom doesn't give up easily. He's back at it again in 2025 to run for school board, and it is a very difficult race in Elmhurst. Even it's been captured by a bunch of, I would say, woke women. So Tom, I want to just thank you so much for coming on. Tell me, why are you running?
Well, first I want to say thank you, Jeannie, for having me here, and that I want to compliment you that you are a true warrior for everything that we're working for and everything that is good in this country. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you, and I've learned a lot from your courage. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about these issues because they're local for me, but they're also national. You know, nationally we have an issue with public education, and in our state we have an issue with education. And a community like Elmhurst, where we've become very affluent, we have an issue in our school system. We are not educating our kids properly. So I was asked to respond to a questionnaire in the local newspaper a couple of weeks ago, and the first question was, you know, what is the most important issue? And it was the same issue 4 years ago when I first ran, and it continues to be the same issue today, which is academic proficiency. The district is constantly trying to steer people away from the discussion around academics because the academics are terrible. This year, the state of Illinois reported, you know, the State Board of Education, the data is available to everybody, that York High School outcomes for ELA and math dropped 4%. So math is now at 49, and ELA is now at 50%.
So ELA is English Language Arts. So basically, you've got 50% of the kids at York High School, a very affluent school district, by the way, very affluent. Only 50% of the kids read or do math at grade level.
Right, and down 4%. And it's actually
down 4% from last
correct.
year.
And if you go back to 2021, when the current superintendent took over, it's about 6%, 7% drop from then. Now, this is during a time when the district is spending money on expensive consultants. They are spending money, we're at $19,000 per student. That doesn't include the capital projects that the district is doing. We are spending a lot of money. And they continue to tell us that we are going to improve, and yet we don't. So
yeah.
One of the comments I made in my commentary.
And by the way, just so you know, we have something out there called an adequacy target, like are you adequately funded? And according to the own state information, you are overfunded. You're spending plenty of money to educate these students, and you still only educate 50% of them. So 2 kids walk in to York High School, only 1 after 4 years walks out proficient in reading and math.
Right. And so when the district tries to point you in the direction of looking at 5th grade and 8th grade and 4th grade IAR scores, which of course are important, what I try to get them to focus on is that the outcomes matter the most, because your children, if you're listening and you live in Elmhurst, your children are getting scholarships, college entrance based on what they do in high school. So if those outcomes are not good, likely your children aren't going to thrive post-high school. So that's the point, right? So those outcomes matter. Whatever's happening between elementary, middle school, and the end of high school in District 205, it's not working for 50% of the children at $19,000 per student. So that's an important thing to explain to people. And then you say, well, what is happening? And one of the reasons I'm running again for school board, even though my children have all moved on, I have college graduates and one still in college, is that I care. I care very much about the children in the community, particularly the children that don't come from affluent families. Many of those children are the ones that are suffering the most from bad curriculum, poor policy. You can go right down the list. There's a track record, and I pointed out in my comments in the patch, and I say, the superintendent, who we're paying about $350,000 a year, who 20 years into her retirement will make another $6 million. So she's paid very well. And I always go back to, if you're a Patriots fan, Bill Belichick says he's famous for saying, do your job. Her job is academic excellence. That is her primary job. And if
She's been there 4 years, and scores are dropping. She gets paid $350,000 a year.
She gets paid, and
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Time to fire that coach.
exactly. So, so she has a track record, which I point out in my comments. Right, her policies, her curriculum, the things that she has put in place. For my son's senior class, I think it was 70% of the students in that senior class missed a month of school. There were no tests. There was no homework. No final exams. And, I hate to go back and beat the dead horse about curriculum and the American Street book, but that was a book that I challenged at a school board meeting 2 years ago.
Okay, Tom, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I want you to talk about the book, talk about some of the other issues, not just grades and finances, but some of the woke indoctrination that's going on at your school. We'll be right back. And we'll also take some callers. Thank you for calling, and we'll take those calls too. We'll be right back. This is The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. All right, welcome back. We're still in conversation. We got Tom Chavez. He's courageously running for school board in Elmhurst. Boy, you never thought it'd come to the time when you had to be courageous, a courageous conservative to run in Elmhurst. But times have changed. Elmhurst, right there on the edge of Cook County, boy, they have just come in and they have found a nice community to sit down, and they have changed the school system, haven't they, Tom?
They've changed it a lot. And what I'd really like to see happen in Elmhurst is the district get back to where it was 2 decades ago when I moved to Elmhurst. And the reason why I moved to Elmhurst was for the school district. Mm-hmm. But it has changed dramatically. And one of the things you and I, Jeannie, were talking about during the break was that we have to make a distinguish between good teachers, which there are many in the district that just want to show up every day and do their job, and the activists. And those are the people that are driving the school district into the ground, right? And before we went to the break, we talked about curriculum, which is important because curriculum is how your kids learn and how that's curated in the books and the materials that are put in front of your children. And a couple of years ago, I went to a board meeting and had discovered that one of the books they wanted to add to curriculum was vulgar. It was a third grade level book. And I went to the school board and I read the book out loud, and the meeting erupted into chaos. But 2 years later, test scores come out, ELA scores drop 4%. I go back to the district and I asked the superintendent pointedly, I said, Keisha, what told you in your doctoral program that giving a third grade level book to a ninth grader, who, by the way, many of them struggling from the pandemic, would elevate their ELA outcomes? And I told her, don't even answer, because nothing told you that. So it's all ideological. It's not aimed at improving the reading outcomes. It's aimed at indoctrination. It can be the only answer to that, right? Why would you give third grade books to ninth graders? There's no reason.
Especially the one that was pornographic. And I want to bring up another point here before we move on to other things that deal with this. But we had the same issue at Batavia Public High School. Breakthrough Ideas wrote about this. I had Lori Higgins, our best cultural and education writer. Batavia Public High School leaders make a mess. And she basically said they were reading a book called The School for Good Mothers. It's a dystopian novel about government intrusiveness. But it is frightening how pornographic it is. And it took one student to tell her parent, and then everybody found out the truth, and guess what? They pulled the book. So what I'm saying to you is you need to know what they're teaching in your public school, maybe even private schools, honestly. And if you do say something like Tom did, he got that book pulled. They don't teach that book anymore, right, at Elmhurst?
Well, they reduced it to 17 pages. I haven't checked lately, but they still had it's pretty much gone from the curriculum. But at the end of the day, when you look back at that situation, it wasn't just the activist teachers that said it was a great book. It was the superintendent. It was the school board that sat there and in the meeting said, we read it. It's a great book.
And wait, was that all groupthink too? That's the other problem I have with school boards. I mean,
Yep.
if you elect Tom Chavez, it doesn't matter if it's 1 against 6. He can bring things to light that they never talk about, that they won't say in public comment, so that nobody is going to know about financial things, curriculum things, policy changes. Like at some point, weren't they doing block lessons plans, or they thought that was going to be like the next savior to educational, outcomes improving? And so this is the stuff that you don't hear about unless somebody is in there who is unafraid to talk about it in public comment, in the public.
Right. And at the end of the day, common sense would tell anybody that that's not the way to help kids learn.
That's true.
And you have the superintendent, the board rubber stamping it and telling everybody how great it is. And then a couple of years later, they're scratching their head going, gee, why did ELA scores go down 4%? They promised a 3% improvement. They went down 4%. It was a 7% miss. And so now you're setting kids. And the issue that parents need to understand is that the remediation for these kids who are not at grade level by graduation falls right on the shoulders of parents who have to pay for it. When your kids go to college, if they get in, they're going to have to play catch up. They're going to have to learn to be college level in math. They're going to have to learn to read and write at college level in order to successfully complete college, right? And so there's a forum coming up on Wednesday in District 205 at Churchville Middle School. It's the PTA Council Forum. They gave me the questions. The first one is, should we really be focusing on test scores when we have all these, should we be focusing on test scores because there are other outcomes that we should be talking about, life ready, career ready. Well, how do you measure life ready? What's the metric for that? They don't want to be, if you take away measuring test scores, what you do is you take away all the accountability, which is what they don't want, right? It should be very straightforward. Your job, academic excellence, here's what you're supposed to learn by the time or be proficient at by the time you go K through 12, right? If you're a taxpayer in Elmhurst, if you think about that, you're paying $19,000 a year. K through 12, you're paying about $230,000 per student, and they should at the very least be competent in core subjects, math and reading. There's no reason why they shouldn't be.
Well,
right?
for those students who do matriculate into community college, we do collect that information at the State Board of Education. And for Elmhurst, for rather York High School, over 14% of the kids have to have college remediation when they go on to community college. And so there you go. That costs money.
Yeah, and another thing, and when you have your ear to the ground in Elmhurst, what you realize is that nearly every parent has a tutor. And I've said this often enough, and I want to say it again, is that the people that seem to care the least about these bad outcomes are the people in Elmhurst who have wealth, privilege, affluence, and are completely unaffected by these bad outcomes, right? These are the ones like they'll go to the wine and cheese party and they all want to be liked, so they don't want to say the wrong thing, right? The wrong thing is telling the district it needs to do a better job.
Okay, so Tom, before we move on here, I do want to move on. So part of the reason that I had you in tonight is because you had come in and you'd shown me a picture of what was happening at one of the plays, and I find it completely inappropriate for school kids to be viewing this type of art, so to speak. And I just wanted you to briefly tell our audience what that was about, because we only have about 2 minutes left, and then I'm going to take phone calls after the break. So sorry.
Okay, very quickly. So there was a play that apparently won an award. The American Street was an award-winning book, so it's the same thing. You give it an award, you can push it off on kids. But anyway, long story short, teachers were allowed to opt their kids out of academic learning to go see this play. If you didn't show up for the play, you missed class time. So you were basically forced to go see it. Students were appalled by it. It was, vulgar. It was, basically, showing it was an ideological play that basically showed men to be misogynists. And there was a photo that a student took where another student is, grabbing another student by the backside, and to the point where, these aren't meek students, but they were all repulsed by it. So the point is that, that should be something that, you shouldn't be requiring in lieu of academic time, considering how grades are. And it's also something you shouldn't force somebody else's children to see and listen to.
Well, they weren't just grabbing their backside. They were in a hug, and the guy was groping his butt. That's what was happening. That was what was displayed on stage. I saw the picture. All these other kids must have been horrified to have to sit through this. And if they didn't sit through it, they got docked as missing class. Mm-hmm. And this is what's happening at Elmhurst Public High School, and they call that great.
Right. And there's, people are outraged. The people on one side are outraged that the picture's on there. I said, well, if you take a student and you're a provocateur, and you don't want people to respond. You don't want their children to say something to their parents. You don't want their parents to say something to the school district or other parents who are equally appalled by it. That's not how it works. You know, if you don't want to be spotlighted, then don't be in the spotlight.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Thanks a lot, Tom Chavez, running for Elmhurst School Board, and we'll be right back. And if my callers could hold on, I do want to take your questions about local elections, and we'll do that right after this break. Thank you. This is The Real Story.